Welcome to Food for Thought. My name is Colleen Patrick-Goudreau from Compassionate Cooks. I founded Compassionate Cooks to empower people to make informed food choices and to debunk myths about vegetarianism and animal rights. I do this through cooking classes, an online cookbook, lectures and workshops, articles and essays, this podcast, and a cooking DVD. You can learn more about who we are and what we do by visiting our website, compassionatecooks.com. Let me send out a huge thank you to today's sponsor, Deborah Falink. Deborah wrote to me a few months ago when she shared with me that she was having her first turkey-free Thanksgiving. I actually read her email in a previous podcast. One of the things she said she got out of the podcast was the feeling that she's not alone in this area, in this mindset, and she's definitely not. And I'm so thrilled I can help her feel that way. So thank you, Deborah, for your dedication to the animals and for your support of this podcast. If you are willing and able, perhaps you'd like to consider sponsoring this podcast as well. Every little bit helps. It really does. Just recently, I received the most beautiful gift from a podcast listener. I pulled the envelope out of my post box, and I noticed it was kind of heavy, and I opened it up to find a letter along with $4 bills and 4 quarters from a young listener in Wisconsin named Jessica. It was one of the sweetest things I've ever received. That was so generous of you, Jessica. Thank you so much. I'm so touched, and I promise you that I will reply to your letter, and I will do a podcast on the suggestions you made. She wants me to talk about teenage vegetarianism, which I plan to do. And by the way, Jessica, if you're listening and have an email address, if you could send it to me at info@compassionatecooks, that would be great. Otherwise, I'll just respond via snail mail. So if any of you listeners can help with the podcast, please visit compassionatecooks.com and click on support our podcast. And definitely let me know if you'd like to sponsor a particular topic. Some people have suggested that as well. I have several pages of topics I plan on covering, but if you'd like to sponsor something in particular, let me know. Also, another thing people have asked me to do is if you'd like to give a podcast gift sponsorship, you can also do so. So I would dedicate the episode to your friend or loved one. So just make a sponsorship contribution and tell me the name of the person you'd like the episode dedicated to. And again, if there's a particular topic you'd like me to honor that person with in that episode, just let me know. And please, 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 please subscribe to the podcast. The subscriptions have pretty much leveled off, and I'd love to see them grow, and I can't do it without your help. So please help make that happen. Thank you. Thank you very much. So I thought it was time to talk about soy. Not about how delicious tofu and tempeh are, not about demystifying the mysterious block of tofu and how to prepare these wonderful foods. I'll talk about that another time. But I'd like to dispel some of the myths that surround the soybean. A few individuals have been incredibly successful at demonizing this little legume. How in the world did an innocent bean become the subject of such intense ridicule and fear? I hope I can put a few things in perspective for you. The first thing I want to make really clear is that we're talking about a bean, okay? A bean, a soybean. It's a bean. It's not a toxin. It's not a chemical. It's not a weapon. It's a bean. It's a legume. It's a plant food, okay? But the way some people talk about the soybean would make you believe that it's threatening the very survival of the human species. Who are these people, and why are they bean bashing? Well, the general answer to that question is actually more questions. Whenever you're given any information, particularly when there are scare tactics or fear-mongering involved, always ask yourself, who is providing this information? What do they have to gain directly, and what do they have to gain indirectly? It's so important to hone our critical thinking skills, particularly these days when we're bombarded with and overwhelmed by so much information. Our access to information through the internet is a good thing, but it also means we have a lot more rubbish to sift through. More than that, we live in a time when product advertisements pose as public service announcements. Think about the dairy campaigns. And when the media skews their content to satisfy corporate advertisers, no longer are media companies selling content to audiences, but instead they're selling audiences to sponsors. Does that make sense? Unfortunately, something I find most distressing about this is even the allegedly non-commercial outlets like PBS and NPR are running ads that are euphemistically known as underwriter announcements. I've said before that I don't have TV. I don't have access to cable and television shows. I have access to it, but I don't have it in my house. So I listen to a lot of public radio, and I can't believe these underwriter announcements, they've turned into little commercials. It's just what they sound like. It's just so distressing. Of course, there's also the press being afraid to go against the government's line. So the government's involved in this as, well, in terms of the information that we get, particularly in a time of conflict or war. So that slants the truth about the information we're given as well. Then there's the issue of the public relations industry driving media coverage of issues and events. With less time to do each story, journalists are increasingly pressured to churn out story after story after story. And to save time, journalists and reporters, they just rewrite press releases rather than do their own independent research. And TV stations broadcast promotional videos that are designed to look like news footage. It's really scary. And then, of course, there's just good old censorship, media outlets killing stories because they undermine corporate interests, advertisers using their financial power to squelch negative reports, powerful businesses using the threat of lawsuits to discourage legitimate investigation. And in the podcast episode called Minding the Gatekeepers, I talked about journalists who don't cover certain things, i.e. vegetarianism and animal rights, because of their own personal biases. Particularly when it comes to something like vegetarianism and animal rights, people have no idea how powerful the machine is that drives the anti-vegetarian, pro-meat, pro-animal exploitation industry agenda. This machine is so powerful, and it's driven by corporations, it's driven by the government, it's driven by media. It's so powerful. Now, I'm not saying all this to make you cynical. I find cynicism really boring and really unattractive. I'm saying this so you know how important it is to know where you're getting your information from, to know where it's coming from, and to think really critically about what it is the messenger of that information has to gain. So what does all of this have to do with soy? Well, there are a handful of individuals and organizations who've made it their mission to demonize soy, namely the Weston Price Foundation, Mercola, and Kayla Daniel, who wrote the book called The Whole Soy Story. But one of the things we need to keep in mind if we want to be thoughtful, critical thinkers is that thousands of conclusive lab, clinical, epidemiological studies, thousands of them, undeniably point to the harmful effects of meat, dairy, and eggs on our health and the benefits of plant foods on our health, right? I mean, eat your vegetables, eat your fruit. That message hasn't changed for many, many years. And yet so many people have bought into the fear-mongering about soy. Can you imagine for just a moment if we actually, in our behavior, reflected the truth about the benefits of plant foods and the harmful effects of meat, dairy, and eggs? Can you imagine if we sincerely and lovingly said to friends, and if we were open enough to hear these messages that said, I'm sorry, you eat meat and you drink cow's milk. Don't you know that these are linked to heart disease and cancer and diabetes and stroke, high blood pressure, gout? I mean, all of these things. Can you imagine if we actually put credence into what we know is true? We don't say that to non-vegetarians, and non-vegetarians are not exactly open to hearing it either. And when someone wants to criticize vegetarianism as a whole, one of the first things they say right after they ask you where you get your protein is soy is dangerous, or soy causes breast cancer, soy causes dementia, soy makes boys turn into girls. I swear to God, I've heard them all. So here are the main points I want to make about soy, and then we'll go into a little more detail about each one. So this whole episode will kind of revolve around these 4 points. Number one, you don't have to eat soy foods to be vegetarian or vegan. There are thousands of edible plant species available if you don't like or if you have an allergy or sensitivity to soy. Okay? Number one, you don't have to eat it. Number two, eat foods in their whole state as much as possible. I've said this again and again throughout the different episodes. Eat foods in their whole state. Tofu, tempeh, miso, edamame, tamari, all experience either no processing at all or a very limited amount of processing. Make whole foods the foundation of your diet. Number three, soy is neither miracle food nor is it poison. It's a bean. And like other beans, like other plant foods, it contains health-promoting nutrients. It's a bean. Number four, be informed. Be informed so you can help debunk the myths. I can't stress this enough. We don't have to have a degree in nutrition to dispel the myths. Even if you just get people thinking by encouraging them to dig deeper to find out who's behind the scare tactics, that's enough just to get people thinking about it. So let's go through these in detail. Number one, you don't have to eat soy foods to be vegetarian. Let's face it, soy foods are linked with vegetarianism whether we like it or not. And frankly, the individuals and the groups that come out against soy know that soy is linked to vegetarianism. So they know that if they scare people about soy, they know if they turn people against soy, they're actually turning people against vegetarianism because they're so closely linked. Well, you can enjoy a varied, delicious, nutritious diet without soy foods. Some people don't like tempeh or tofu, and mainly it's because they haven't been to one of my cooking classes or tried my recipes or checked out my DVD. So fine. If you don't like it, you don't want to come to my class, that's fine. I'm just teasing. But seriously, if you don't like it, that's fine. Some people are allergic to soy. Okay. Some people are allergic to peanuts. Some people are allergic to strawberries. That doesn't mean peanuts are inherently bad or strawberries are inherently evil. So just because someone's allergic to soy doesn't mean soy in and of itself is a bad thing. Okay. Number one, you don't have to eat soy. Number two, eat foods, all foods, including soy, in their whole state. So what are these foods, and why should we eat them in their whole state? Well, to answer the second question first, why are whole foods so important? One of the things that's happening, not just with soy, but across the board, is that we're focusing on single nutrients, and that's kind of the information that we're fed constantly, to focus on single nutrients. That's the problem I have with people asking about protein or omega-3. If you're eating a whole foods plant-based diet, you're getting all of the nutrients, and you're getting them in abundance, and you're getting them in the state in which they were meant to be consumed, in their whole state. So particularly with soy, one of the things that's happening is that concentrated soy protein is being put in a number of processed foods. Everything from Cliff Bars and cookies to ice cream and pudding. It's showing up as soy isolate protein or isolated soy protein. That's what you would see on the ingredients list. And there are a couple problems with this. One is that we don't know what the effects are going to be because our diets have never been so full of processed foods just in general, and particularly in terms of these isolated proteins. We just don't know. In the laboratory, scientists have extracted soy protein and soy isoflavones because these are the things that seem to have the protective effect on our bodies, the isoflavones and the protein, to determine their effect on the bodies of non-human animals. And then they try to interpret this to human experience, to human health. And that's problematic for a number of reasons, particularly because the physiology and genetics between humans, non-human animals, and human animals are different. So it's really hard to extrapolate that information into the real world. So there's a real problem with isolating nutrients for that reason. And the complexity in a blueberry, in a strawberry, in an apple, the complexity of that food is beyond what we can replicate in a lab. And its health benefits stem not from the single nutrients that we can pull out and say, oh, that's it, that's what's actually really healthful. But the health benefits stem from a combination of all its components eaten all at once in its whole state. The combination of the fiber and the antioxidants and all of these things put together is what actually makes this food really healthful. So to isolate the seemingly beneficial properties of something like soy to prove its health benefits or dangers is not sound. It's just not sound, in my opinion. But nobody asked for my opinion. When the benefits of soy were regarded as an opportunity to make a lot of money. So in the last 10 years or so, the inclusion of isolated soy protein in processed foods has increased tremendously. And look, that means a lot of money to be made. So let me ask you a question. Having heard me explain all of this, what's the common denominator here? Is the problem with soy in general or isolating soy proteins? Is the problem with soy in general or with processed foods? There's a big difference between isolating the protein and putting it in as filler in every packaged food on the grocery shelf and eating whole soy foods. So that leads to the answer to the other related question. What are these whole soy foods? Well, you have your unprocessed soy foods such as tempeh, miso, whole soybeans, which we eat as edamame, natto, which is a fermented soy food eaten in Japanese cuisine, tamari soy sauce, and soybean sprouts, right? I mean, and then you have your minimally processed whole soy foods, such as tofu and soy milk. Now, soy milk and tofu were included as whole foods because the processing involved heating the soybeans and just blending the whole soybeans with water and coagulants doesn't turn them into purified isoflavones. It doesn't concentrate them. Yuba, which is a byproduct of soy milk, would also fall into this category. Whole soy foods. The problem isn't soy. The problem is processed foods. The more the foundation of our diet is whole plant foods, the healthier we will be and the less confusing all of this will seem. Now, does that mean we can never have a little soy cheese on our pizza, or we can't enjoy a little TVP, texturized vegetable protein, in our chili, or one of those, lunch meats, one of the vegetarian meats? No, the research doesn't support the conclusion that eating a little processed food is going to be detrimental. Just don't make it the foundation or the mainstay of your diet. Should we be afraid of consuming soy foods as part of a healthful, whole foods, plant-based diet? No. Should we eat a soy-based diet? No. Variety, 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 variety. Now, number 3, soy is neither miracle food nor is it poison. Now, be wary of health claims made about single nutrients. In fact, I think our focus on single nutrients is what's contributing to everyone feeling so bloody confused about how to be healthy and how to eat healthfully. And that is why, despite my problems with some of the other things he has written and done, I highly recommend you read Michael Pollan's latest article in the New York Times called Unhappy Meals. I think some of you are falling over right now hearing me recommend something he's written. But look, I don't appreciate some of the other things he's written. And I don't appreciate that he chose to go out and kill a pig because he wanted to see how it felt. I have a lot of problems with those things, but I really appreciate his article in the New York Times called Unhappy Meals. He starts off the article by saying, eat food, not much, mostly plants. That's the gist of the article. Eat food, not much, mostly plants. Now, the reason I recommend it, particularly in light of our discussion about soy, is twofold. 1, it emphasizes our need for food, not processed products, but whole foods. And 2, it addresses the problems with trying to rely on the latest scientific studies to extrapolate what we need to know to eat healthfully. Now, I appreciate his perspective in this article very much. And though at one point he says that eating small amounts of meat won't kill us, I just want to make it clear that my reason for doing the work I do and living the life I do is that even if eating small amounts of meat may not kill us, it kills the animals. So that's why my reasons for being vegan are for the animals and for nonviolence and because we don't need to. But anyway, but otherwise it's a really great article. Related to what I said about becoming critical thinkers, it's so important that we take the latest scientific studies with a grain of salt and just relax and eat a whole foods plant-based diet. It's really that simple. It doesn't have to be complicated, but everyone's so confused because of these studies that come out every day. One thing to keep in mind is that often when you hear something like the scientists conclude or studies show or research reveals, you have no idea what the details are. And the sound bites are not sufficient to make us understand. Was the study based on animal research, which I said before is problematic? How many people were in the study? Was it a test tube study? And has it been extrapolated to a real human population? If it was a clinical study, is there a chance people lied in the questionnaire? Are the reports of the study quoting the whole study, i.e., did the journalists do their own research, or are they merely quoting an abstract, or worse yet, a press release? Is the use of language misleading or misinterpreted? Is it biased information based on studies done by or funded by the meat, dairy, egg, sugar, or even soy industries? So it's important we ask these questions when we hear about the latest study before we draw conclusions that will affect our own health, the health of our loved ones, and the lives of animals. One example is the media frenzy that took place after results came out of studies looking at fiber intake and colon cancer. Do you remember this? Headline after headline concluded, a high-fiber diet does not protect against colon cancer. How many of these journalists actually read the study, and how many people just threw up their hands and said, oh my God, forget it. What's the point of eating healthfully if a high-fiber diet does not protect against colon cancer? But the devil's in the details. I mean, they didn't give the details because that's not the conclusion the researchers drew. you have to understand what these studies were. One of the studies merely added a fiber supplement to the disease-causing American diet. And as I said before, you can't just isolate nutrients and expect them to work in the same way as when they're part of all the other components of the whole food. One study had participants only slightly reduce their fat intake with a modest increase in fruits and vegetables over 4 years. In several of the studies, they were quoting, even the groups supposedly consuming a high-fiber diet were eating anywhere between 14 and 24 grams. That's still much lower than the 40 to 50 grams of fiber recommended per day for true optimum health. So, that's just one example. There are a million other examples. So don't rely on sound bites from the media for your health information. It's not that complicated. Eat a whole foods plant-based diet, including whole soy foods if you want them. If you don't like them, don't eat them. Number 4 is become informed so that you can pass on the correct information. There have been a number of negative claims about soy, though the overwhelming research is positive. Let me repeat that. The overwhelming research is positive, but there have been negative claims about soy. And I invite you to check out the details yourself. You can do so by visiting a page on my website. It's www.compassionatecooks.com. On the top toolbar, there's a button that says resources. That drops down to a number of other choices, and choose cooking and nutrition info. On that page, there's a document called The Safety of Soy, and it repeats some of what I'm saying here, but it also provides links to a few different sites that go through each of the negative claims point by point and puts them into context. Of all of them, my favorite is the first one, Eating Soy, Myths, Truths, and Everything in Between by Krista Novelli. I think she does a fantastic job explaining each of the claims made so that you'll walk away with a much better understanding of what the heck is going on here. The goal is to be informed and empowered for yourself and so that you can pass along the correct information to those who are misinformed. So please pass on the correct information. It'll make my job a heck of a lot easier for one. I want to say 2 more things about soy. One is that there's another argument against soy, and unfortunately this often comes from people who call themselves environmentalists, and they claim that soy is the cause of rainforest destruction, that the rainforest is being cut down to grow soybeans. Actually, much of the rainforest is being chopped down for cattle grazing, but it's also being chopped down to grow soy, but not for human consumption. Americans and Europeans can't raise all the feed domestically that's needed to sustain their meat addictions. So agribusiness started cutting down the rainforest. The overwhelming majority of soy, or corn, or wheat for that matter, grown, is used to feed animals, to raise them for human consumption. In fact, Greenpeace recently unveiled a huge banner over an Amazon soy crop that read KFC, Amazon criminal, to accentuate the point that large chicken and other companies like KFC are responsible for the destruction of the Amazon. It takes many pounds of soy and other plant foods to produce just 1 pound of animal flesh. So if you're worried about the rainforest being chopped down for grazing or to grow soy, the best thing you can do is to stop eating other animals. The last thing I want to say is that soy crops grown for human and cattle consumption are the most genetically modified crops. So I encourage you to buy organic soy foods. I encourage you to buy organic in general, but please make a point to buy organic soy in particular. At this point, under the current standards, if it's organic, it's not genetically modified, but stay tuned. And check out the Organic Consumers Association and join their mailing list to stay on top of those issues. So I really hope that helps. I really, really hope that helps just a little bit. We need to be informed, we need to inform others, and we need to hold people accountable. Whenever you hear someone make claims about something that just doesn't make sense, especially if it sounds like it's based in all of this fear, it's up to us to counter their ignorance with information. We're not exactly taught to have keen critical thinking skills, and we're manipulated every day by the media and corporate advertising. So keep it simple, keep it whole, keep it plant-based, and keep up the great work. This is Colleen with Compassionate Cooks. Thanks for listening.